I need to read something, I'm just going to keep these off, which I'll probably be reading. Anyway, I hope you guys had a good Thanksgiving. It's Saturday, November 28th, and it's hard to believe it's already the holiday season, truthfully. So I hope you guys are safe, well, you know, had as comfortable as a Thanksgiving as possible, and that every day is blessed from here on forward, if it hasn't been already, but it has been. So I can't erase that one. My prayer is that we can all begin to see the blessings in every day, is what I'm trying to get at, because 2020 is, no, I'm not saying anything you don't already know, has been an extraordinarily challenging year for all of us. So that said, if you don't subscribe to my newsletter, then you may not be aware that, or if you don't follow me on social media and you're new, you may not be aware that I've actually divided my company, Synergessence. It's 2 divisions now. It's Aromagenomics, which is why we're here today, and then I've started another one called Heart Disposition, and it's really learning how to harvest the it's about harvesting the benefits out of everything we experience. And notice that I didn't use the word good. It's harvesting the benefits, and part of that includes the word that I used earlier, which was challenge. 2020 has been an incredible challenge, and to me, I go back to the original meaning of the word challenge, which is it's a summons. It's a summons to show up. Challenge is not the same thing as a problem, where we look at a misfortune. And there's been a lot of misfortune, and at the same time, the misfortune around us is challenging the rest of us. Okay, it's challenging the rest of us, and so how can we accept the summons to begin to show up in this world differently, not repeating old patterns? That's, again, actually the benefit, or the premise of Aromagenomics. Einstein is noted for saying that we cannot solve our problems with the same level of thinking that created them. I'm paraphrasing, I'm pretty sure. But you get the idea. That's basically the idea. It's like, whatever thinking got us into this issue, we're going to have to think differently in order to resolve the issue. So again, that is the foundation for Aromagenomics, because we are currently sitting in an epidemic of degenerative disease. And Aromagenomics was born out of a desire to bridge that gap. Actually, it's out of the box thinking. And so if regardless of whether you know me or you're familiar with me or not, I want to introduce myself a little bit. That's kind of what this is. But I'm not going to go into my background experience like I do in other videos, in other places that I talk. I want to explain, again, the origins of Aromagenomics and why Aromagenomics. So it began to evolve. Well, I want to go back to almost 20 years when I was a practicing aromatherapist, and I was sharing a practice with some acupuncturists, and I mean I had my own clientele, and I was priding myself on blending essence to match the essence of the individual, and then I was doing, obviously blending according to what their needs were. I was providing oils based on recommendations, right? Books, things were taught. And I was really dissatisfied with the fact that everything was speculative, and it was just, there were some gaps in that level of information, as far as how to use the oils. And we'll get more into that in a little bit. And I don't mean by where to put them on the body. When I say how to use the oils, it's mean applying them as far as, times of day, kind of like a prescription, like we talk about taking a supplement or a pill, you take it 1, 2 or 3 times a day. I mean, we even see that instruction on herbal tinctures. So there were some gaps. There was some, there were answers that weren't there. And then when people don't get the results that you aim for, and I mean, part of that was triggering my perfectionist. So I continued to pursue. I did get certified internationally through the Pacific Institute of Aromatherapy. I do have other background in, education as far as pharmacology. And so there was already this interest in health. But I've always been enamored with nature, just taken by nature. I mean, being in nature, there was just something about it that fascinated me. And I wasn't really I was having a hard time distinguishing how everything could be so separate, because somehow there was something in me that was like, there's a connection here, but I couldn't put my finger on it. And it was before a time that we were really ever talking along those lines. Now, I did read, there's a lot of historical writing that, for instance, Ralph Waldo Emerson, he wrote a book called Nature. Fascinating, absolutely fascinating book. And so those types encouraged me to stick with whatever that was compelling me to explore these oils further, to explore nature further, and to actually begin to connect those dots and close that gap, how to be able to resolve those issues that were not answered for me. And so fast forward a few years, and I'm introduced to epigenetics. It was just becoming big. We were beginning to get into that 23andMe, and then subsequently other genetic testing companies coming out, where we were, submitting our saliva for to receive information about our raw data. And I have my opinions about that, but that bears no relevance to this conversation. But the fact is that we have an epigenome. In fact, our genome comes in. Well, it's divided. There's the level of the genetic, our genome, that is pretty much concrete. It's pretty much, it's set. I mean, that's what determines the shapes of our eyes, the shapes of our fingers, the uniformity of from side to side, color of our hair. I mean, the shape of your nose. I mean, it's what they refer to as the Mendelian heredity, which is everything that you've acquired or inherited from your lineage, physicality wise. And of course, this is where it's that in that aspect of the genome that we develop genetic disorders, that are what we would label as rare genetic disorders, where there's a physical mutation. Give you an example, like my older boy's father, he doesn't have any, well, he has fingers on his one hand, but they were like very malformed and very tiny. I mean, he has a hand, but it's just misshapen. And it's that kind of thing. There was something that occurred that caused a deformity. So this is what I'm referring to. So when there's like a switch that gets flipped, or something that occurs along that level of the genome that links us to these genetic deformities and other genetic disorders. But then there's the epigenome, which is also recognized as the methylation pathway. And this pathway is, or this part of the genome is adaptable. And that's what intrigued me, because what's coming out, or what has been coming out, is that it's fixed. Meaning and I actually fell into that belief system for a short while, believe it or not, until I enrolled myself in some upper division psychology courses. And I took a couple of years, several semesters of junior, senior level university college courses or university psychology courses, where I was introduced to because my professors, they were very, especially in one in particular, but there was a number of them that were actually fascinated. And again, this is because the Human Genome Project had been launched, released. We were engaging in these epigenetic tests. And so there was additional, there was a lot of information coming out. And so a couple of the professors, like I said, we started having discussions around this in class, which I thought was fascinating. So up until that point, I was sold on the idea that this is a fixed issue, just like the rest of the genome, right? And nobody had ever made the distinction, truthfully, at that point, that it was separate, that it was, we think of our genetics as all one mechanism, and nobody had made that. Anybody that I was working with, and this is professionals, nobody had clarified the fact that this was almost two separate systems. I mean, they integrate, but they work independently as well. So I had people coming in, I was working with people that, well, I've got these genetic SNPs, these genetic defects, genetic mutations. I mean, this was the languaging that was going on. And I was hooked. I mean, it was like, it made sense. I mean, oh my God, there's something, because again, up until this point, and even up into this day, we have this belief that there's something wrong with the body. So I just don't believe that there's anything wrong with the body. At the core, I just don't believe there's anything wrong with our body. So, but I continued, but I ignored that and went with what other professionals were talking about. I'm just getting my water. How these other professionals were interacting with their clients, and which is, again, these fixed issues. And so, of course, there were reports being generated that, well, if you have this SNP, and which stands for single nucleopeptide, single nucleopeptide, or I just prefer SNP, SNP. And so it's a real thing, right? So don't get me wrong, it's a real thing, meaning that there is an inactivation or there is an alteration, because it could very well be an activation. But yet we were looking at these SNPs, okay, I'm going to use the word alterations, producing reports and then telling people what they were predisposed to. And then they were subsequently being administered all kinds of supplements and what have you, based on this report of SNPs. And so I was formulating oils around that. But see, here's the interesting thing. This is where I really started getting into understanding that science knows more about plant constituents and oils than that's being published, or publicized rather. Because I was able to find evidence then to be able to create blends based on the chemistry or a chemical in an oil to help improve. Because if you just go out and look up oils, a particular oil, let's just say lavender, right? You go out and look up lavender in regards to, no, forget that. If you go out and look up lavender, you're going to find all kinds of websites that will tell you lavender is good for that. So disregard that one. If let's just pick one like Douglas fir, okay? And let's just say you were really into this Douglas fir and you wanted to find out if it was good for, okay, again, hypothetically, you have a genetic test and it shows that you have some SNPs on the nitric oxide synthase. So you wanted to know if Douglas fir would be beneficial for nitric oxide synthase. Chances are you're not going to find any information on that. But if you start breaking it down into the constituents, there's where your information is going to come from. And so this was happening as, you know, I was gathering this information around the beginning of 2010, 2011, where I was able to at least back my blending up to support people in their methylation journey. Now, the challenge that I was facing is, mind you, I did use the word challenge, but the challenge I was facing was, in fact, I was working within an office practice, and if they had gone to see the naturopath, and the naturopath had recommended these different supplements, and then they would come to me and I would put them on an oil blend, formulate a blend for them, and then they would go on their way. And then the next thing, several people all of a sudden would come back with like massive blistering or like huge rashes or flare-ups of psoriasis. And it just was too much for me, because that's the last thing I ever wanted. I never wanted anybody to experience discomfort with the oils. I want people to get the most out of the oils. Keep in mind, this is in fact how Aromagenomics came into existence. And all of this is building up to why I am so fierce about enrolling people in this level of practice. So at that, I, again, devastated. I didn't run. I mean, I felt like running with my hair on fire. But as I was investigating these various constituents, I was beginning to see that if you're using something, say for instance, a product called methylation accelerator, and you're using a blend that has constituents that are known for their ability to enhance the transfer of methyl groups, well, of course you're going to have, it's called an interaction, okay? It's called an interaction. And I brought this to the naturopath's attention, and they told me, nah, that's not even, there's no way. There's no way. These oils don't have that kind of power. And I was just stupefied. That's the word I have. I was stupefied, because this has been a part of my life, and I wasn't insulted, you guys. I was not insulted. I was stupefied. I cannot describe the passion I have about the benefit of essential oils. And somebody standing there telling me, this isn't possible, they're nothing. It was like telling me my child was useless. So I did what I knew to do as a professional, and I altered blends to relieve the patient or the client, to relieve their discomfort and help restore some sense of stability. And you know, I had basically begged this particular practitioner to please at least have me consult so that we could work together, and they didn't even want to do that. And I've been met with this countless times, and in fact, that's one of the biggest gaps that I am continued to attempt to close. And I feel like I have what's necessary to close that gap. But it's met with such that level of, it's not possible, they're useless. This is just placating. We're just placating people because people like oils. So the message that's being conveyed to the general public is, And where I'm coming at this is like, oh no, these are awesome, but not awesome from the sense of, hey, buy from my downline, but it's like, no, do you get what you have? You excuse me a minute, I'm gonna turn the fan on over me. I'm sitting here, now I'm warm because I'm getting excited. Hang on just 1 second. And she's back. Okay, so with that said, I worked there for a little while longer, practiced there for a little while longer, and I eventually took my what is the word I'm looking for? I took my practice to be independent. And I just was sitting here thinking, I'm hoping that all the settings are right. I guess they are. Okay, well, I think it's okay. So, all right, so anyway, back to what I was saying. So I worked with him for a while, and until I decided to go independent because it was too much of this. And I was, although willing to make sure that the people were taken care of, there was more to this. So fast forward to, I mean, and I have actually worked with and aligned with a couple of other doctors that are heavily involved with the working with the epigenome, those who have created their own supplements. And so I was just kind of soaking all this information in, because you have to understand that I have this ridiculous, unexplained need to drive. Let me put it that way. I have this the ridiculous drive to get as much information as possible and then connect the dots. So I was just taking all kinds of information, and that's part of the reason why I ended up going in and just signing up for enrolling for upper division psych. So again, now fast forward a few years, and these professors are showing us these, and we're discussing epigenetics in a way that I'd never heard anybody talk about. I mean, people who actually work in the field, which is, this is adaptations. The epigenome is the way the body adapts. And what's interesting to me is I have, during all that time, also been working with Amish people. And they've been one of the biggest muses I could have imagined. I mean, just talk about blessings. Because although they're very much, everybody thinks, well, they like natural. Well, they do like natural, and they are not unwilling to go to the doctor and take medications if necessary. They're reluctant. There's always that, do I have to go? And I've had to coach them, yes, go see your doctor. And that's where I met all the time with physicians who don't even want to talk to me because they're useless. They don't have it. I mean, I was working with some family out of Utah at one point, not an Amish family, a non-Amish family, and the psychiatrist said the same thing. He can put your son on any oils he wants. They're absolutely, they have no, there's nothing to, they're useless. They're not doing anything. They're not doing any good. I felt bad because this young man who was in his teens had already been diagnosed with schizophrenia, and they were just like, just medications, and if we do oils, we do oils, but they're really not doing him any good. So anyway, so the Amish have no problem getting on medications. Yes, they do like they're natural, but they're always contacting me with regards to all kinds of health issues. And so they really were a huge inspiration when it comes to investigating the mechanism of action. And what I mean by that is the way the body reacts and generates inflammation, and how it ends up resulting in dis-ease. Dis meaning lack, of course, ease meaning ease. So lack of ease. What is it in the body that's generating this lack of ease? If you could tell, I mean, I like words. And that's kind of how I saw this. It was really about there's something going on in the system, and when I'm talking to these, and these professors, and we're involved in other scientists' conferences, other science conferences about epigenetics, and of course this was around mental health because it was psychology, right? But they were getting into the epigenetics of mental health issues and talking about these being adaptations. Now, what's interesting is to listen to scientists talk about this being adaptations, but then the go-to is, well, we're still going to, treat it like a disease. And so again, one more gap. But it was helpful information. And so then with the Amish inspiring as much research as they did, because they relied on me to get to the bottom of answers for them so they could progress. And I began studying the mechanism of inflammation, and ultimately isolated it to very specific chemicals in the body that is repetitive. It's the same thing over. So there's actually the initiating chemistry to all degeneration is the same. It's all the same. And then through this pandemic, I've been able to identify the fact that science recognizes the stress system and the chemistry that's born of that. So the evolution of aromagenomics is based on my observation of what's missing and wanting to provide an answer. And currently we have, one of the biggest mindset is that it's useless, like I pointed out. And on one hand, I can go, okay, I get that. I can understand that with the level of quality that we have, the various levels of quality, it is not a guarantee that the oils you're using are of any benefit. Totally understand that. On the other hand, it's harmful to tell people that they're not worthy of use, or they're only good for palliative care. Because if you actually have the authentic, you have pure, you have genuine essential oils that have not been adulterated, now you stand to make a huge difference. And it's really where I come in with aromagenomics, because if you can apply, when you apply rather, the use of constituents based on, if you're using an epigenetic test, bearing in mind that that test report is a snapshot in time. Now, it's only fixed, the way I see it, it's a static report when you adhere to the same beliefs and behaviors, and if your reactions remain the same. But again, the epigenome is not just about survival, it's also about thriving. Thriving in the sense that it regulates our digestion, it regulates our ability to conceive, fertility, okay? It regulates menstrual cycles, it regulates heart rate and respiration. So the epigenome is not, it's multi-purpose. It's to help keep the body functioning, and then it's to help the body get out of a dire situation. And what we're facing currently is a world of people that are essentially on a high alert. where their stress system is just always going. And so it's consistently producing that initializing chemistry that generates inflammation and ultimately leads to breakdown, depending on the way your epigenome and your genome interact with one another and the messages being conveyed throughout your system. And that's where it seems to be very complicated. And that's what I love about the oils, because number one, oils contain a huge number of constituents. And learning how to understand what's in your bottle and then pairing it with goals is how I want to say that, which is, you know, I would imagine stability, you know, balance, hormonal. I mean, and again, there's a number of factors that get involved, and this is what we get into in the Aromagenomics program, is being able to identify. And this is the great thing about when we get into the program and you're working directly with me. Number one, it's real time, it's live. You have access to me, you have real-time guidance and suggestions and so forth. So that's the really cool thing about this, is because what's going on with you, just to say, for instance, or your child, you've gotten blend tests and you've got all of these reports coming in, and we kind of take a hard look at, well, what's collectively going on, what's going on with their system altogether, and beginning to hone in on, because let's face it, the constituent, it's not like they're isolated to one oil. Okay, so just take, for instance, linalool. Okay, linalool is a single constituent and it is found in a multitude of oils. Okay, but it's the synergy of the constituents that brings on the properties that we're familiar with. So learning to work within the context of the chemistry, being fully aware of what systems you're wanting to influence. And this is the reason why custom blending is really great, because to use a pre-made blend, there's maybe oils in there that aren't suitable for your system. They're not required by your system, but there might be other ones that would be better for you. So learning how to identify those is really the goal of this ongoing. And again, signing up with me and joining a program means that you actually have lifetime access. Okay, so I'm going to say I've got 2 levels to join in. I'm just going to say it right here. For $500, you get into a 4-month program, which is just your basics. Okay, we won't get heavily into the, it's just basics, everyday lifestyle. Okay, for $35.95, you get everything that we're talking about here. Okay, and again, it's all the same. It's 2 hours a month of live training, 3 hours a month of follow-up and live discussions, Q&A. Access to each one will have their own Facebook community. So there's discussions going on there. You have access to me for real-time guidance throughout. And again, it's lifetime access because, as I mentioned, this stuff is constantly changing. There's more and more information coming out through science. And my goal is to really, as I said, slow down the progression of degeneration, restore credibility to the industry, to the field, not the industry, but to the field, to the science of aromatherapy, to restore that and bring it to a professional level. And I'm doing that individually because right now we have access to these oils and we have the ability to use them at home. And so at the 4-month program, that, by the way, the more expensive program, the $35.95, is actually, what is the word? It's an 18-month program. So the 4-month program, it's either $500 up front, or you can pay $275 initially, and then another $275 within 30 days. $35.95 is $975 down. I think it's $975 down, and then it's $550 a month after that. bear with me here. I don't want to give you, and I wasn't planning on doing that right, saying that to you now, but I'm just putting it out there. Sorry, it's $9.95 down. That's, I'm making, I didn't even remember my own notes. So it's $35.95, $9.95 down, and then $5.50 a month for 5 months after that. Okay. But again, that also gets into the epigenetics, and again, if you choose to go for the 4 months and then decide you want to get into the bigger package, I will actually credit you the $500 off the final cost, the total cost of the 18-month package. Just throwing that out there. And so beyond that, it's really about learning how to blend according to those constituents. Again, like I said, linalool 1,8-cyanol is one. It's a big one that's common in a lot of, and I'm really sorry, this lighting is, it's just very gray and rainy, and I don't have very good lighting. I have a handout here I could be happy to share with you if you. I'm going to put it on the PDF cloud of mine, and you're welcome to go check it out. I'll provide you the link. But 1,8-cyanol is another term for eucalyptol, and it's obviously been named after it was probably first identified in eucalyptus. And it's a sedative. It has sedative type properties to it. But again, when it's compared with other constituents, the properties of the oil itself change. So that's part of the reason why understanding what's in your bottle is a big deal. And I guess I'm going to go out of order here, because I mentioned earlier in the mechanism of action of inflammation and degeneration. The mechanism of action is the way I like to think that in my head, I see these genetic, these genes as switches. Okay. So there's a change, there's a flip in the switch, and these adaptations. And so that's what a mechanism of action is. So something triggers the body, and then this switch either is activated or deactivated. This is why I said a SNP isn't necessarily a gene that's been turned off. It very well could be a gene that's turned on. And that, I have to be truthful with you, although the psychology classes were very beneficial in opening my eyes with regards to adaptation. There was a big clue when a client of mine out of Georgia had sent me, she sent me her Librello report. And if you're not familiar with the genetic tests, I don't know how they're doing it today, but even as a few years ago, it was very interesting because they produce these reports that show red, yellow, and green colors on the genes. And so this is how it was clarified. Green means that everything's good. Everything's acting the way it's supposed to. Everything's turned on and ready to go. Yellow means you have one off, one on. And red means you got two turned off. Now, what's fascinating is you think about how we recognize those three colors, right? Red, yellow, and green. Red is warning. You know, it's we talk about red flags, right? Red is stop. When we go to this, outside. I mean, you go to the traffic light, it means to stop. Yellow is to use caution. You can, it's still okay, but you probably want to use a little caution. And of course, green is good, healthy, right? Think about that. Even the Archangel Raphael is green because it's about healing. So psychologically, those fool with us hardcore. But through that one particular report, I sat there and I read it word for word for word, pages. I think it was like 20 pages long. And in the small fine print towards the end of this report, it actually pointed out that a red one doesn't necessarily mean it's, just because there's a gene that has a double switch off doesn't mean that that's bad. It could very well be turned off for a good reason. And my mind went, wait a minute, this is where this good, bad, right, wrong thing has got to come to an end. I mean, I've never adhered to, I don't like that philosophy as it is. I don't see life as good, bad, right, wrong. And we were applying this to our health. And if the body has turned something off, there's a good reason for it, period. Who are we to judge whether it's good or bad? We may not like the results of it, but the fact is it's turned off for a good reason. And that is something that the good reason is what you need, what your body needs. It was turned off. That's a good reason. So that was that report, and I saw that report, like I said, long before I went into the psychology class. So this got me thinking. It's like, no, there's something here. So again, one of the first things that comes to mind when I think about the inspiration of a and I actually wrote about it, but the inspiration coming from an Amish person was the fact that this one woman had her son, he was 27 at the time, and he was a mute Down syndrome young man. But we had the greatest conversation because he could make sounds, okay, and he would understand what I was saying. Oddly enough, even though he was Amish and they have their own language, but he did understand English, and so we were talking, and I knew he could understand because he was responding yes and no. I mean, he was, or he would, the way he was responding, it just was. I was pretty confident we were communicating because I understood what he was getting at. Let me put it to you that way. So I was able to respond to him based on what he was conveying to me, and then he would respond back when I would answer him. It was a really fascinating experience. But that said, Mom told me that they put him on a gluten-free, casein-free diet, which improved his speech. That he was able, I'm like, I'm not hearing words. I mean, I hear sounds. So, but she was under the impression that, and maybe he went from making no sound to sounds. She didn't clarify that. But yet, again, my mind was piqued because gluten is a protein. Casein is a protein. And I don't believe nature would produce these things if the body couldn't use it or dispose of it. I mean, the body's triggered as it is because of what man is doing and pushing on it, but just left to nature, I just couldn't wrap my head around it. And so I started doing my research and found a gene called DDP4. I think it's DDP4. Like I said, I've actually written on this, and which is what actually begins to assimilate gluten and casein. And there's actually a casein receptor. I wrote about it, and I'm writing about it in my book on sleep. And it's part of the MAPK pathway, which is how the body takes in information and either triggers inflammation or not. And it's part of the sleep cycle. It's part of the circadian rhythm. So casein is, so, and it's called that because science has recognized the fact that casein, the molecule casein, when it's assimilated, it fits right into that receptor. But here's where it gets even cooler. The DDPF4 gene that I mentioned earlier, the one that begins to assimilate these proteins, in fact, is deactivated when the angiotensin 2 receptor is activated. And angiotensin 2 is a hormone, or angiotensin is a hormone used to raise blood pressure. So when that kicks in and that's activated, it shuts down the body's ability to assimilate gluten and casein. This is the reason why a gluten-free, casein-free diet makes a difference. Because if you don't put it in the body, you don't have the sensitivity because the body's not, because if the body can't assimilate it, then you have larger particles floating throughout the body and the body, it starts to activate more immune reactions, which then compounds fatigue. It leads to other types of allergy type reactions, you know, whether it be congestion, runny eyes, itchy skin, runny eyes, watery eyes, runny nose, itchy skin, you know what I'm saying, rashes. So that's why we perceive that we're actually allergic to these things, but in fact, it's a sensitivity based on the fact that the body's not able to use it. So that's my story on the genome or the epigenome and why it's not fixed and that it is adaptable. And the beauty of this is that the constituents in essential oils have the ability to modulate genetic activity. There again, it comes back to how we use them. Because the oils contain constituents that some of them you don't want to be using for a long term. I mean, and it's always wise. You know, my clients are, why do you always make me switch my oils out? Or why do you switch my oils if I'm blending for them? And the answer is because the chemistry is changing. And, you know, I'm going to keep using, you know, I'm going to keep with the same focus. Okay. Like I realized when, let me give you an example. So, but take it off this right now. Like for instance, when I go get on the elliptical, okay, and have a plan for the day. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this, right? And then I notice that after a while, if I'm tired, not even that actually. It depends on the music because I just stream Pandora the whole time I'm playing music and I put it on shuffle. So it might be like a really hard, you know, like really primitive kind of song, you know, you can feel the beat, you know what I'm saying? You can just feel the rhythm. And so I want to go slower because I want to feel that rhythm. And then there's other ones you just kind of want to go, you want to just like dance with it, right? So based on that, I will adjust my my resistance levels based on what I'm feeling. But what's interesting is I always show up with a plan, and then the rigidity about that plan is like, well, no, I said I was going to do this. Are you your word? I mean, this is the silliness that goes, are you your word? Are you committed to this? Well, yeah, I am going to stay on this for the whole time that I said I was, but why can't I shuffle within that plan? You see what I'm saying? The plan is to get on, enjoy the movement, enjoy some music, clear my head, maybe be inspired somehow, and get off on the other side at the end of my time. How that plays out, it varies. And it's based on what I feel. Like if I feel the energy of a song, I'm going to adjust my resistance to reflect or to get into that groove of the song. And this is how I see life, and this is how I see the body. And this is the reason why we want to, in fact, alter our use of oils. Because if we stick with the same oils, okay, we have a plan, all right? So maybe it's weight loss and coming off of diabetic medication, you know, maybe that's what it is. Or maybe it's getting off of cholesterol meds. I mean, there's a plan, okay? You use the oils for that plan, but be willing to adapt them within the context, okay? Being willing to, knowing that you have a plan and you're not deviating from the plan, we just need to change things up along the way to facilitate improvement, okay? It's not a pill, okay? It's not, so the mechanism of action of an oil modulates the way a gene operates. Medications control. There's a big difference. So the synergy of an oil actually helps to regulate genetic activity, and because there's, as I mentioned earlier, there's a number of constituents. It's not a single constituent, so you might have 20, 30, possibly more constituents in there, even just traces amount, but it's the collective that has an overall impact on the body. Whereas, you know, a medication might have maybe tops 10, 15, you know, and then those aren't even all active. Some of them are inactive, which means that they're not having a direct genetic influence. So medications are about control, and this isn't about anything bad about medications. The whole point is that their mechanism of action is they target a specific function, and then that's what's supposed to happen. And we take those pills forever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever. And did I say ever? And this is where you start to see epigenomes kind of almost getting static, because we're forcing it to stay in the same pattern. The addition of oils helps to relieve some of that static nature and allow for some more fluidity to come in. And this is where I think sometimes health professionals get nervous, because some medications may have to change, or they may no longer be needed. But this isn't necessarily a bad thing. I feel like if our health profession is behind people getting well, then this would be championed and celebrated. And this is the potential of oils when they are authentic, genuine, pure, those levels. By the way, if you have oils that say therapeutic, that is not a measurable quality. That is saying it has the ability to create physiological effect. So it influences physiological activity. Well, we can say that about any chemical. Not to be disrespectful to the essential oil companies that put therapeutic on their label. It's just that that's not measurable by any test, if that makes any sense. You can measure authentic and genuine because we have your GCMs, and then you also have your spectrographs, okay? And I have actually printed out here, and you're welcome to have this as well, a list of essential oils and adulterants. So bergamot is often, and other citrus oils are rectified and acetylated hoe oil. They use synthetic linalool, limonene, or linalool acetate. Okay, so that means that they're not whole oils. They've been adulterated with these other synthetic chemicals, like I said, linalool, limonene, and linalool acetate. Grapefruit orange terpenes are tend to be just purified limonene in a bottle. There's no other constituent. It's just limonene with some fragrance. Jasmine absolute can be adulterated with indole, animal cinnamic aldehyde, ylang fractions, artificial jasmine bases, and synthetic jasmones. Lemongrass typically has synthetic citral in it. Patchouli can have geranium, balsam oil, copaiba, actually have copaiba added to it, cedarwood, patchouli, vetiver, and camphor distillate residues. So you see, I mean, there's a number of oils that become adulterated. So knowing what's in your bottle is exceptionally important. So that's the reason why genuine and authentic, okay? Why pure? And because at that point, you know that you're actually doing something that promotes fluidity in the body and actually helps to take the pressure off of what's going on with medications. And if you're not using medications, whether you're using medications or not, it doesn't matter. You still want to be able to change those oils out. Again, because of the way they modify genetic activity. And you're progressing the body. So being able to adapt within that plan of your wellness plan, your healthcare plan, being able to adapt within that and understanding that oils are not like medications. They do have an influence on health, but they're not medications, so we cannot treat them like medications. And so that's part of the how when I talk about using them, is being able to realize that, okay, look, I've been using the same oil for 5 weeks now, I should probably change it. And the interesting is, some people are so hung up on, and I don't mean any disrespect, I got to make a blend and I got to use a blend. I used to do that all the time. And I started having like little partial blends sitting everywhere because I would just move on like, okay, well, this one doesn't even appeal to me. And one year I had gone to a great trade show. I met some really wonderful people. Loredana was one. I don't know where she ended up, but she was great. I just enjoyed her so much when the time that we knew one another. But her thing is when people would come to her table, because she was blending on, her own blends, and she had this one, I'll never forget, it was called Antiquity. Just, oh my God, it's wonderful. But this was early on in my days of being involved with oils. And Loredana used to tell people, come to the table, she had an assortment, come to the table and just smell each one, and whichever one smells appeals to you, that's the one your body needs. That was her idea of helping people to select what was necessary for them. So she had these blends, and then people would select what smelled good to them. Well, that's good for so long, but eventually your body is going to, like, I'll give you an example. I was loving Douglas further for a while, and then all of a sudden the last few days I'm like, this isn't. So evidently I don't need what's in Douglas fir right now, or the Synergies. So, but that said, while it's good to blend, okay, it's okay to blend. I won't use the word good. It's okay to blend. You can make your blends, but then you're going to end up, if you're like me, having little tiny blends sitting around all over the place that may or may not ever get used. So I like to have an assortment of oils around, and then maybe today use, maybe bergamot and galbanum and frankincense and myrrh and rosemary, verbone. Okay, I'm really very particular about making sure I use the whole name and not just a portion of the name, because again, there's different varieties, which we'll talk about here shortly. So that said, because that was today, and and yesterday was something a little bit different. Maybe some of the oils were the same, but then I selected other ones. Nothing wrong with that. Making a blend for you for the day and using it a couple times that day. So you might just put a bowl or a glass, or just small amount, and just use it. I do have a safety and dilution chart. You're welcome to that as well. Just need to let me know if you want it, and then I'd be happy to send these things to you. So that would be the list of adulterants. That would be, what else did I tell you? Definitely the safety and dilution chart. Oh yeah, and the one on 1,8-cyanol. I'm happy to send these things to you. So if you desire them, by all means, just let me know, and I make sure to send you the link to all of them as a PDF. That's one reason. And again, like I said, well, it's a good reason to do it because of the change in the body. Another reason is because oils contain both a combination of monoterpenes and sesquiterpenes, and they have ketones and they have phenols in them. And so the repetitive use of something that can potentially be neurotoxic is not advisable for any great length of time. So I've historically have told people, especially my Amish people, use it for 4 to 6 weeks, because they buy blends for me. Use it for the next 4 to 6 weeks, but we're gonna, change it out. But technically, I would much rather have them use single oils and then use them and then change them out during the day, like I was telling you, because of the phenol content, because of the ketones. And when you change them, when you change your oils, you lessen the exposure to these chemicals. And like it's, they're mucolytics, they're neurotoxins, and neurotoxin meaning it actually has the potential to cause burns. So I'll give you a couple of examples. Pardon me. So that the phenols would be like eugenol, carvacrol, thymol. Okay, ketones are carvone, menthone, pugolone, benchone, camphor, thujone, and verbenone, which is what I mentioned earlier about rosemary. You can get a rosemary 1,8-cyanol, you can get a rosemary camphor, you can get a rosemary verbenone. So there's different varieties, but the point before I jump into that is the fact that we have different types of compounds, chemical compounds in your oils, and that is a big reason why you want to be switching them out. So it's okay. Again, you have a plan to get better. It doesn't mean that you need to like, just kind of like randomly go. I mean, don't go the Loredana way, especially if you're dealing with health issues. You want to select oils that will support your health issues and moving your body forward. I'll say it that way. You could potentially go ways like I gave you the example of how I was kind of had an aversion to the Douglas fir. It's true. Pardon me, I don't know why I'm yawning. It's not that I'm bored. I think it's just the gray. But it's with the Douglas fir, I mean, I did switch to cypress. So I kept within the same family, and I kept within the same kind of parameter of constituents. There was just a change, and the cypress is what appealed to me. There was just something about that one that just went, this is what I want, this is what I need. But I don't recommend that for people if you're just getting started with at this level, unless of course you choose something that was in with, ask for guidance. Just kind of ask for a little bit of help, because it's always good to have a second set of eyes and ears until you become more familiar with this. Keep in mind, I've been working with oils since 1989, and working with them at this level, like I said, for at least the last 10 years, longer, 20 years, with the mindset of, as I've laid out earlier, but a good 10 years with the epigenome and really exploring that. And so one of the things that, while I'm thinking about it, that has come up when researching what questions people have and so forth, has been around lack of information. As I said earlier, I was finding 10 years ago, there's plenty of information out there. Not at that time, there wasn't a lot, but there was some, and it wasn't as published as it is, not as readily available as it is now. And I, of course, did find ways to get my hands on the information. But the fact is like when I go to websites like Johns Hopkins and other medical websites, not publications, but actual medical websites, and they're talking about oils. I know I've seen UC Davis say the same thing as Johns Hopkins. The comments are that there's just not a lot of information to support the use of essential oils with regard to healthcare. And nothing could be further from the truth. Nothing could be further from the truth. We have medications, 80% of our medications come from the study of plants. We're able to replicate limonene and linalool and linalool acetate. If you go to PubMed or Sigma Aldrich, if you just look up constituents, just plug in a constituent, pick a constituent, 1,8-cyanol, and plug it into their search engine, you'll find where they're actually making this stuff in labs. So why would, and then look at what they're being used for. So don't tell me there's no evidence to show that these constituents don't have validity or benefits. They absolutely do. Alpha-philandrine, it's a good example. Alpha-philandrine is one that's typically found in like dill. It's in elemi. It's in a number of oils, but it has kind of like that lemon lime kind of tang to it, smell, aroma. It's what gives them those particular oils that twang. And it's an appetite stimulant. Think about all the lemon lime things we have, the chips, even if it's not lemon lime flavored, but you could, these things are being added. It's funny, I used to hear a few years back how people thought Starbucks was adding things to their coffee to make it more addictive. I don't know if they were putting out, they understand that constituents do this. They study this stuff. So it's going into our food system. And so, of course, you can't eat just one, because, I mean, this is what we're talking about. So to read out there that there's no substantial evidence to show that these oils contain or have the ability to benefit human health beyond palliative care is mind-blowing. And as I mentioned earlier, I mean, on one hand, I recognize the fact that, you know, there's so many questionable qualities out there, but if we're actually talking genuine and authentic, and people are using genuine and authentic, now it's a different story. Wow, this is really bad lighting. So that's another point there, is knowing, you know, that I bring to the table. So when I talk about doing these programs and, you know, and helping people, my aim is to actually reveal sources to you, provide you with the resources so that you can read it for yourself, and to, more importantly, back what I'm saying. You know, I think somebody was saying that the idea of evidence-based or scientifically backed, you know, they don't, if you don't want scientific backing for essential oils, then I don't know what you want, because that's the credibility issue. You know, when a doctor says they don't have any credence, I'm like, should I show you? So everything I've faced, any of these gaps, have always prompted me to go out and find evidence that I was on the right track, and that this is not just, but it's not just about my ego. It's more about wanting people to have comfort, wanting people to have, I mean, we shouldn't have to be suffering at this level. I mean, there's enough struggle in life as it is. And if oils can actually help relieve that, you know, the physicality of our struggle, and make us, and help us be more comfortable in our skin, then I say, why not? So I know that I said I was going to talk about something else, but I feel like I've said a lot so far. Just, so a couple more things on mechanism of action. Again, it's the way, so with oils, they have a mechanism of action. And when this applies more to when you're working with medications, because there's a couple things. You don't want to duplicate the activity. So if, let's just say a person's taking an antidepressant, you don't want to, there's certain aspects to, you know, there's certain oils that will actually act like antidepressants. You don't want to mix those. I just don't recommend it, because it's the potential for interaction is huge. Let me just say it that way, because they've already studied a lot of these plants. They already recognize the value to a number of these constituents. And so therefore that medication is based off of the knowledge, plant-based knowledge. So to replicate that with an oil, there's no telling what direction it could go. And adverse reactions look like this. It could look like an allergy, you know, watery eyes, runny nose, itchy skin, headaches, nausea, dizziness. I mean, that could be one interaction. Drop in blood pressure could be another one. Something that they refer to as an adjunctive or additive effect would be, so if you take an antidepressant and you use an oil that's an antidepressant, you suddenly have like almost like bipolar moments, like you're just like like completely exhilarated and you know, wound up. Or you could have the exact opposite. The other type of adverse reaction is one that you don't know is happening. There could be switches that get flipped that you don't even realize it, and it may take a few years, and it may result in something more problematic down the line. So duplicating the mechanism of action is not advisable, and you want to just use caution with how the medication is being cleared from the body, meaning through the CYP450 enzymes, because these enzymes are used by the body to break down and break down into secondary metabolites and either use them for further purpose or excrete them. And if you've got oils influencing the same level of activity, or you know, like let's just say you have a medication that is a substrate, or it activates a particular CYP450 enzyme, and you have an oil that inhibits that same enzyme. Again, there's no telling where your adverse reactions, I mean, what those are going to look like. So this is what I mean by mechanism of action, is really understanding this. And it doesn't have to be that complicated, because the more, it's kind of like if you go in and you drive a car, okay? When we first started driving, we didn't know anything about it. It's like we're behind the wheel of this big machine, and we might be excited, but we're still nervous. But you know, you give yourself a little bit of time and you're like, yeah, I'm an ace at this. I'm a rock star. Look at me, I can drive a car. It's the same thing. So it may seem overwhelming, and that's the reason why I provide the real-time guidance, because I want this to become like a glass of water. Well, if you don't like water, whatever you like, but you know what I'm saying? It's something that's just, you could do in your sleep. You just recognize, and then you begin to trust your gut, because you know these things well enough that you just go with what you have. And knowing that, you know, it's based on what your body already needs. You've already established a set of oil ideas that would be for your system. So again, even in these groups we talk about specifically, we get down to personalizing it, because personalizing it it's essential. That's the reason why the Human Genome Project was even started, was to identify what's really going on with individuals genetically. And this is what's led to the personalization of medication. This is what's, you know, or I should say the administration of medication. So we've begun to personalize wellness at that level. I mean, they're personalizing it, you know, I mean, everything. They're becoming very, very, in order to target people and situations. So if we're doing it with everything else, then it makes sense to start doing this with the oils. Again, not to complicate matters. And this is the reason why you get lifetime access, because now you actually have the availability of me to help you personalize your exact use of these things. Let's see, I know I feel like it's a fireside chat with my candle going here. Let's see, as far as, I'll say a little bit more about blending, and then I may call it that for now. So with blending, I've been asked the question, is what's, you know, is less really more? And my answer to that was, it really depends. Less is more when you use it, like I was talking about, you know, you use it less frequently, and you actually get better results, because you're not taxing the system and you're not rigid in that plan to get better. Less is more when you let me think. That's probably the way I would say less is more, because technically we're all living with some sort of degeneration. Something is going on in the body. If you have any, you know, show me a body that is asymptomatic of anything, and I will be, I have no idea what I'll offer up at that point. But the point is that we all are walking around with some degree of stress in the system. So it's not advisable to, I mean, unless of course you have a super, super sensitive system, and you need to start off in minuscule amounts, you know, like literally homeopathic type dosages of oils, which you can do, where you can use a single drop and maybe a tablespoon of oil. I mean, it doesn't seem like you'd be getting anything, but you really do. And then working your way up, building it up. So that's one way less would be more, because if your system is really, like I said, hypersensitive, until we can kind of bring that stabilization down into more of an even keel, then, or bring the body into an even keel, then you can begin. And I've done this with a number of people, so it's quite easy to do, but that would be another way less is more. After that, you want to use oils. You want to put them on your skin. You want to use less carrier and more oil. Meaning instead of just a couple of, I mean, here's the deal. We've been accustomed to dilution. We've been raised and groomed and programmed to believe that it's necessary to dilute the oils. And while that may be true for some of us, because of the hypersensitivity, being able to use oils straight on the skin is fine. I do it all the time. Now, I want to say a little bit about that because people are concerned at that point about allergies. What you're going to have is you're going to have sensitivity, and if you have a sluggish lymph system, the skin is the largest organ, and it will, and it's one way of detoxing. It's a large detoxing organ. So the toxins that the oil, it will come out through the skin, because here's another thing about what we were talking about constituents earlier. Oils, there's certain constituents that are known to increase the tissue permeability. So if you put an oil on your skin and you don't use carrier and you suddenly get a rash, consider that you're actually pulling toxins through your skin. And it's coming out rapidly through there because your lymph system isn't moving. Your body's detoxing faster than the kidneys can clear. So therefore it's coming out the skin. So at that point, I suggest you stop altogether, give yourself a good week, drink lots of water, get some physical activity, take some Epsom salt baths, and possibly switch out your oil to something else and go to a carrier. In which case, I still recommend higher levels of oil instead of diluting them, like 5 drops in a tablespoon. And the reason for this is that, when you mix it like that, you get far less of the oil. You get a lot of carrier and you get a small, you get a smidge of oil. If you take a carrier, and let's just say, for instance, I recommend that you put 5 drops on for whatever reason, okay? So you get a smidge of coconut oil or olive oil or whatever, you put it on your hand or wherever you're gonna put it, and then you put 5 drops on top of that. Now you're getting 5 drops of the oil like I recommended, but you also have the carrier there as a barrier to protect the skin and prevent any sort of reaction. Does that make sense? So that is my recommendation for application. That's how I see using these things therapeutically, either that or taking a bath with them. I like it up under the nose because it crosses the blood-brain barrier. That's a really good place. Where if you have, swollen glands, put them directly on. You can do that. If you've got respiration issues, put it on your chest. If you've got digestive issues, put them on your tummy. And again, using, if you're concerned, even remotely concerned that you may break out on a rash, just lay down a carrier. It's not going to prohibit them from being absorbed. It's just going to reduce, it's going to slow the absorption down, number one. And number two, it's a barrier for the skin to protect it. That's it. So if because if you put it on the skin straight, it goes immediately into the body and everything goes, it rushes, right? That's the reason why it blows out through the skin. So if you put a vegetable oil like coconut oil or olive oil or grapeseed oil down first, and then you put the oil on top of it, you've now reduced the absorption rate, so you're not flooding the system automatically. I hope that makes sense. And in which case you're preventing any. Now, if you want to increase absorption, then you would want to use aloe. And again, I have the safety and dilution chart if you want it. It kind of gets into the basics of safety and dilution, but you're hearing it from me here, how I recommend it. So that would be another option, would be aloe, to increase, if you're going to increase the absorption rate. But as I mentioned, some oils contain constituents that actually have the ability to increase tissue permeability. That's the reason why I really heavily warn people against using anything with menthol in it. And by the way, peppermint is consistently replaced with corn mint. Corn mint has a higher, I think the menthol content in corn mint is actually higher than peppermint, or it's comparable. It's the only other mint that has as much menthol as peppermint, and I'll tell you why here in a bit. But oftentimes you get a peppermint that's not really peppermint, it's actually corn mint. And the reason for that is because corn mint is far cheaper to grow than peppermint. That's another problem. And that's another reason why we're seeing so many adulterations, because it's cheaper to mix other plant constituents in to kind of accentuate. In fact, I want to say something about that. So oftentimes the reason why they do add synthetic constituents is to enhance the aroma, because you, my friend, purchase things based on the way it smells. And if you bought, let's go to lavender, let's just say you love the smell of lavender and you've been buying this lavender, and all of a sudden you buy from somebody else and it doesn't smell the same, you'd be like, ew, I'm not going back to that one. But what if the second one was actually real and the other one was adulterated? You see, based on the growing conditions, whether that be light, water, nutrients, the aroma of that plant is, the chemistry of that plant is going to change. So your aroma is going to change. But yet they will add chemicals to these things because they know you shop by the scent. And if it doesn't smell like you expect it to, you won't shop with them. You won't ever buy their product again. So it's a control mechanism. And on top of that, and this happens with when, let's just say, rosemary verbenone, okay? One plant grows by the sea, one plant grows in the mountains, okay? It's the same plant. You distill them, you know, you have a crop here, you got a crop up there. You harvest them, you distill them. The crop up there smells entirely different than the crop over here by the ocean. Why is that? Because of the quality of the soil. The soil content changed even though it's the same plant. This again is another reason why it's important to know what's in your bottle. And you want to get those measurements or those percentages per batch, not just one time, but every time you buy that oil, you want to have the percentage so that you know. And they don't really deviate if they keep getting them from the same area, the same producer, but it's always good because anything can change. So it's just a good safety measure so that you know what you're actually using. But that's a good portion as to why oils smell different or they smell the same, because of where they're growing and the adulterations that are occurring. But back to the peppermint, this is happening with peppermint. It's being substituted with corn mint because corn mint is a lesser expensive plant. And the same thing happens with lavender. True lavender oftentimes gets substituted for lesser expensive lavender type plants because it's cheaper to grow and it's being bottled as lavender. You better be, you know, so this is again, corn mint constituents are going to be different than peppermint. Certain, I mean, all lavenders are going to be different based, you know, comparatively speaking to the true lavender. So, and true lavender, by the way, you guys, is really, really expensive. It's kind of like up there like rose. So, so again, adulteration is huge. Where the plant grows is huge, and adulteration oftentimes occurs in order to control your buying power. And so your best bet is to latch on to a good source and stick with them. And regardless of what comes your way, unless you really find another great company that you know that you can switch over to or you can kind of bounce between, but I would stick with one you know, simply because, and they will notify you of if they're changing producers or if there's a change in batch, but generally you will get the good source of it, the information that you need to guarantee the quality of the oils you have. So, and as far as anything else with blending is concerned, the thing that I promote when it comes to blending or selecting oils individually is to pick them based off of the symptoms, okay? The epigenome, like, you know, let's say you have sleep apnea, okay? And let's say you have digestive issues, but sleep apnea is the big concern. So you want to go with something for inflammation. You want to go with something that helps. So you want to look for the respiratory system. You want to look for inflammation, right? I would also recommend using something that promotes lymph movement, because if you've got that much inflammation, the lymph system is stagnated, okay? So I'm just thinking off the top of my head, sleep apnea with, let's just say, consistent indigestion or recurring indigestion. I would go with something for them like dill and dill weed, lemongrass, German chamomile, And cedarwood from Texas would be the start. Those would be the start. And I chose cedarwood because sleep apnea is actually considered a sleep disorder. And that may not be, that one I would interchange, but I would at least go for the lemongrass, because if you've got recurring indigestion, and dill would be very helpful for that, as well as for the breathing. German chamomile definitely for the respiratory system and inflammation. And cedarwood is iffy just because it's really good for helping people. The cedar is really, I would probably, that I'm thinking about, I would probably go for cypress. So scratch the cedarwood and go to cypress would be the ones. That would be where I would start. And it's not the final and blend, but it's a way to start. But you see what I'm saying? Because it incorporates, cypress actually has a diuretic. It actually helps move fluid. Okay, German chamomile helps to keep us relaxed and open, and it actually helps to reduce inflammation. Dill supports respiration, but it also has carbone in it, which is helps with the transfer of methyl groups, and sleep apnea clearly is a disruption of the methylation pathway. All inflammation is. So carbone in there helps to move, like I said, it's a transfer of methyl groups. Now, that said, if there wasn't digestive issues in there, I would recommend spearmint, okay? Because spearmint also is very high in carbone. But there's digestive issues in there, so the dill is a better one. And then the lemongrass actually helps ease, it supports nitric oxide synthase, which reduces the reactive oxygen species that's released and burning the stomach, okay? But it also helps to move fluid. So this is the kind of thing that I like to talk about, and why it's good to know what an individual is going through and then be able to begin to make the recommendations. So with that said, I'm going to invite you, like I said, to join either one, the 4-month program where we just kind of go through basic daily life things, minor emergencies, emotional distress, lifestyle, and so forth. If you don't mind, I can tell you. So again, it's 2 monthly 60-minute trainings, 3 weekly. So you get 1 a week. So you get 2 trainings a month, and you get 3 weekly live Q&A discussions. You have access to the community, consistent access to me for real-time guidance, and lifetime access to the information because it's ongoing, okay? It also includes your handouts, and the most important thing I can tell you is that it's real time. And that's $500 or $275 up front, and then $275 in the next 30 days. Or we can do the 18-month program, which is $35.95. Let me back up. This last one is actually has 7. There's 7 categories that we're talking about in depth. I'm talking about in depth. So that's the reason why it's over 4 months, because I've got to break those 7 down into, because I'm looking at 7 trainings, and then the final training would be more just kind of pulling it all together in the closing. And this one for $35.95, you have 8 in-depth lessons with handouts. There's also an orientation that gets you started. That's $35.95 or $9.95 down and $5.50 a month for 5 months. Again, you also have lifetime access to me with guidance. Even if you have cases, if you're a professional and you have a case that you want to run by me, I would be your consultant in a pocket. I'd be your consultant on tap, so to speak. So that's available to you as well in that program. And of course, I'm going to also be hosting a lot of live conferences where I invite other professional health aromatherapists in to have discussions about these different things and give you exposure to other people and really create this community. So, but in the meantime, if you want that 1-HCNL handout, or the safety and dilution, or the adulterated, the adulterants, list of adulterated oils, let me know, and I will make sure that you get that as well. And let me see if I have any other notes here. I think that's it. So I appreciate you watching this. Hope you guys are doing well again. And I'm going to sign off for now. Looking to do some live chats, taking questions if you've seen this and you like, we can do live talks on Zoom. All right. So you guys take care. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I appreciate you so much. And I will see you soon.